Hello everyone, and welcome back to Hack and Craft. Today, we're continuing our journey to conquer what might just be every tailor's worst nightmare, threading a needle. So without further ado, let's dive right in and get started. Let's begin with this needle right here. And for the thread, I'm going with green, my favorite color by the way. Now, I'm going to give it a try the traditional way, just threading it through by hand to see if it works. It looks a little tricky, I must admit, but hey, let's not give up too soon. Sometimes, even the simplest task can test your patience, right? Oh no, it didn't work out. It's harder than it looks, isn't it? But don't worry, we're not giving up that easily. Instead, let's try a different method. Something a little smarter and a lot less frustrating. First, take a close look at the end of this thread. See how it's all frayed and fuzzy? I'm just going to use a tiny bit of water to smooth it out. That's right, no fancy tools needed here. Now I'm going to dip the tip of the thread into some water. Just a little bit, just enough to get it damp. No need to soak it completely. Once it's wet, I'll gently pinch and smooth it between my fingers to shape it back into a clean, narrow point. That helps straighten out all those tiny fibers and makes the thread behave a lot better. Much easier this time, don't you think? When the thread is slightly damp, it becomes easier to control. The fibers stay together more neatly, and the tip of the thread gets a bit stiffer, just enough to help it slide through the eye of the needle more smoothly. This little trick may seem simple, but it can really save you a lot of time and frustration too. Now, let's move on to the second trick, shall we? Right here, I've got a razor blade all ready to go. Alright, now I'm going to carefully cut this razor blade in half. I'll be extra cautious, and you should too if you're following along at home. Alright, now I'm keeping just one half of the razor blade. Next, I'm going to carefully cut off the sharp cutting edge. Remember, always be very careful when handling sharp objects. Safety first. Let's move on to the next step. Alright, this is exactly what I need. The middle part of the razor blade, which is all these wavy grooves. I'm going to use this section to create a little hook. First, I'll carefully cut one end to make it sharp and pointed. This sharp tip will help the hook grab onto the thread easily, making it much simpler to pull it through the eye of a needle. Alright, so the tip of this new little hook is a bit curved, isn't it? Let me carefully straighten it out so it's nice and straight. There, that looks much better now. A straight tip will make it much easier to catch the thread and guide it through the needle's eye. I'll carefully push the sharp tip of the little hook right through the eye of the needle. Next, I'll loop the thread through that tiny groove at the tip of the hook. This groove is designed perfectly to hold the thread in place, making sure it doesn't slip off when we pull it through the needle. Alright, now all that's left is to gently and carefully pull the thread through the eye of the needle. Look at that, so simple and neat. This little trick really makes threading a needle feel effortless, doesn't it? Alright, now let's switch over to a needle with a smaller eye and see how this trick works on it. Sometimes, threading a needle with a tiny eye can be quite challenging, but don't worry, we'll tackle it step by step together. Let's give it a try and see if our little hacks still make the job easier. The steps to follow are just the same as before. First, carefully pass the little hook through the eye of the needle. Then, loop the thread across the small groove on the hook. Finally, gently pull the hook back to the needle's eye, bringing the thread along with it. It's a simple, straightforward method that really helps, even with those tiny needle eyes. Alright, now let's move on to the next step. This time, we're working with a piece of electrical wire. First, I'll carefully strip away a section of the outer insulation to reveal the copper wire inside. Don't need to strip too much, just enough to expose a single copper strand will do. This exposed wire will come in handy for our next part. Alongside that, I'll also prepare a small clamp to help with the next step. This little tool will make everything much easier. I'm going to fold the copper wire in half and use the clamp to secure one end tightly. This folded end will act just like a little hook. It's a clever trick that helps us handle the wire more easily, especially when threading or pulling things through tight spaces. Alright, now that it's done, let's give it a try. First, I'll take the needle with the bigger eye and thread the copper wire through it. See? It goes through really easily, doesn't it? Next, I'll pass the thread to the copper wire loop. And all that's left is to gently pull it back through the needle's eye. It's super simple and makes threading so much easier. Now, let's move on to the needle with the smaller eye. I'll carefully adjust the copper wire to make it a bit thinner, so it can fit through the smaller hole more easily. The steps are just the same as before. First, thread the copper wire to the needle's eye. Then pass the thread to the loop of copper wire. And finally, gently pull it back through. It's a little trickier with a smaller hole, but with a bit of patience, it works perfectly. Alright, moving on to the next trick. We're still using that same electrical wire. First, go ahead and cut off all the copper wire we previously prepared. Now, right in the middle section of the wire, I'm going to carefully strip away the outer insulation to expose the copper strands inside. Next, fold the electrical wire in half carefully. Then, take a pair of tweezers with a fine tip and gently pull out just a small section of one copper strand from the fold. Be very delicate here. Just tease out a little bit, not the whole strand. This tiny exposed piece will come in handy soon. So take your time and do it carefully. Alright, now that you've folded the electrical wire in half and adjusted that little bit of exposed copper wire, it's very similar to the trick we used earlier, isn't it? So, here's what we'll do next. Carefully thread that copper wire loop to the eye of the needle. After that, pass your thread to the copper wire loop. And finally, pull everything back through the needle's eye. And just like that, you've successfully threaded the needle. Pretty neat and easy, right? Alright, now let's switch to a needle with a smaller eye. I'll carefully thread the copper wire through the smaller needle's eye first. After that, I'll pass the thread to the copper wire loop, just like before. Then, all you have to do is gently pull everything back through the needle's eye. Alright, now let's move on to the final tip. Here, I have a paintbrush ready to go. You might be wondering, what does a paintbrush have to do with threading a needle? Well, stick with me. This little trick will make your sewing life so much easier. Let's dive in. On this paintbrush here, I'm going to carefully pull out a single bristle. Just one strand, nothing more. This tiny bristle is going to be our secret helper for threading that needle easily. Let's see how it works. Beside me here, I've also got a cotton swab. Yep, one of those everyday items that turns out to be surprisingly useful. I'm going to cut a small section from the stem of the swab. Just a short piece is enough. This little bit will play an important role in our next trick. So stay with me. Now I'm going to take that tiny bristle I pulled from the paintbrush and fold it in half, just like this. Then I'll thread it through the small plastic tube we just cut from the cotton swab. See that little loop formed at the bend? That's the part we'll be using. Now let's secure it. I'll take a lighter and gently heat the opposite end of the plastic tube. The heat will cause the plastic to soften just a bit, and as it melts slightly, it'll grip the bristle tightly and lock it into place. Alright, now that our DIY needle threader is finished, let's go ahead and test it out, shall we? First, I'm going to insert the folded bristle through the eye of the needle. Look how easy it slides through. Then I'll take our thread and slip it right through the loop formed by the bristle. Just pull the bristle back through the needle, and just like that, we've conquered the tiny eye of the needle once again, with nothing but some clever, super simple tricks. Go ahead and give these tips a try, and don't forget to show off your results. If you found these hacks helpful, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you won't miss out on any of the exciting ideas coming your way. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.